All right, just finished recording with Sreeram from Eigen Layer. Jeez, there was a lot to unpack in that one. I think Eigen Layer is one of the most anticipated protocols that I've seen in a very, very long time. The idea of kind of restaking your ETH to add additional layers of security to infrastructure like oracles, bridges, relays, data availability, anything like that. Really, really innovative product. Really interested to see what happens from there and what the kind of second and third order effects are. Imagine being able to restake your staked ETH and additional volatility rewards and yield. It's going to shake up the industry, I think. So enjoy the episode. If you could do us a favor and just like and subscribe. And also, just one more favor, if you could subscribe to the newsletter, that'd help us massively. If you've seen our episode with Tyler from Beehive, you understand where we're going with the newsletter and trying to help that grow. You can help us massively there. It takes 2 seconds. You'll get it twice a week in your inbox. Just market deep dives, really lighthearted, really fun. Lots of good referral systems and things like that going on there to get you guys some free stuff. So yeah, in return for all this free content that we're pushing out, if you could just do those really, really low barrier to entry tasks, really appreciate it. Yeah, that's about it. Let us know what you think of the episode. And yeah, here's Sreeram from Eigen Layer.
Your next career move could be the one you never imagined. Web3 nomads. Everywhere jobs, for anywhere people.
I think that's working. So we've got Sreeram from Eigen Layer, probably one of the most anticipated projects we've seen in a long time, just based on the amount of messages I get to try and get Sreeram on. I can't imagine what it's like on his end, but thanks a lot for taking the time out. I can imagine it's extremely hectic on your end, so thanks for being here.
No, it's my great pleasure. Thank you so much, Grant, for doing this. Looking forward to having this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'd like to do usually is everyone's got a kind of interesting backstory or some kind of clear path to where we are now. Just want to kind of dig into that a little bit. So what's kind of led you to this space? Is it a traditional path, if there even is one, to get into this industry, or like how are you here now? Basically?
Yeah, this is the most non-traditional industry. Everybody has a unique story. Somebody was joking to me that it's not common that two dentists meet and then say, "Hey, how did you get into dentistry?" That's not a thing that they talk about. We talk about it because it is something unique and special for each of us, and I deeply appreciate it. And it's one of the things I love about the space is the eclectic backgrounds. My own is, I did my PhD and master's from 2006 to 11 working on peer-to-peer wireless networks. So this was a time when we were thinking, hey, wireless needs to proliferate, but you need to have huge amount of infrastructure, and why not just have wireless nodes just talk to each other and form a kind of peer-to-peer network and build stuff off top. And so we were working on algorithms and protocols for ad hoc peer-to-peer wireless networks. That project, I mean, it was successful as an academic project. We just did mathematical theory of some of these things, but we had this vision that something like that would manifest. But as it turned out, wireless infrastructure became prevalent all around the world. I mean, we were betting that there'll be developing countries and many other places where wireless proliferation can be helped by these kind of technologies, and it didn't turn out to be the case. So I moved on from there and got into computational genomics, which is quite a bit of detour because I had to do some bit of soul searching on what are important problems and what should we commit to studying the next 10, 20 years for. And I went into computational genomics, which I continued, and I joined as an assistant professor at the University of Washington, Seattle, working on computational genomics, which is a very exciting area. But 5 years back, in 2018, my advisor for my PhD, his name is Pramod. He right now is in the Princeton Blockchain Research Center. So he called me and said, "Sreeram, do you know this thing like Bitcoin? And there are all these problems in peer-to-peer networks that we used to study. We were studying it in the wireless context, of course, but things like throughput, things like latency. How do you optimize for these things? How do you measure performance? What is the theoretical limits of performance? All these kinds of questions." He's like, but the two big problems in Bitcoin are like it has low throughput and it has like very high latency. Do you think we can work on this stuff? And he was so excited, and I started thinking about it, and all my old experiences came back. My PTSD from my thesis not really like translating into. Actually, the one place where people were very excited about is the defense, where like ad hoc networks were of interest to them, but we didn't want to go into that direction. So that's but at this time, like he was telling me all these things, so I thought, okay, we should first think about whether this makes sense to study for like a 10-20 year thesis, because I had a 20-year thesis for genomics, but this was a much closer match to my technical skills. And I was as I was thinking about it, like one of my like paradigms that use a mental model that I use to think about us as a species, Homo sapiens, is this framing of why we, Homo sapiens, have kind of taken over this earth, right? In some basic way, this one species, which is, maybe a very insignificant population, like 250,000 years back, and kind of took over this planet, is a kind of miraculous feat. And Yuval Noah Harari, in his famous book *Sapiens*, asked this question: Why is it? Why is that? And I think the root node of the answer is, he says, we cooperate flexibly in large numbers. We cooperate flexibly in large numbers, and this I use as a kind of driving thesis that like whenever we do things which help us cooperate flexibly in large numbers better, then it actually gives us like a fundamental evolutionary advantage. And the way I think about crypto is basically like upgrading our cooperation infrastructure. Like it upgrades the ways with which, because what is the fundamental friction to cooperation is trust, right? I'll cooperate with you, if I know how the fruits of our cooperation will be shared between us. And that is really like the driving friction in enabling large scale cooperation, is that trust. And to the extent that that can be built algorithmically or as or as an automation of social consensus, I think blockchains and crypto can be like a superpower. So the one easy formulation I use is, just like the internet is the information superhighway, crypto is like the cooperation superhighway. And we can create like highways of like cooperation on this thing. Once I got this kind of like a mental model, I was already deep down the crypto rabbit hole.
You don't come back out once you're in there.
No, you're just lost. Everybody else thinks you're crazy. Like, you're doing all this stuff with like protein folding and all this stuff. And okay, it's fine. Like, this is even more base layer. Once you upgrade this, everything becomes better. Like, how we cooperate to do discoveries, how we cooperate for innovation. In fact, my unique, I think, or at least our particular viewpoint on the blockchain is one of the most important things that blockchains have done is to separate or decouple who brings trust and who brings innovation. I call it the decoupling of trust and innovation. I think this is such a powerful idea. So, if you're writing a smart contract, a DeFi program, whatever, right? Like, you as an innovator just bring the innovation, like this idea for how to run this market or how to structure the protocol, how to incentivize various actors. But you don't need to be trusted. Like, you can be like a nobody. You can be a pseudonym. You man, woman, child. Like, we don't care, right? Like, so some people say like, Web 2 or the web was like, people were talking about don't be evil, and crypto is can't be evil. Another thing I like to say is like, don't discriminate is something people are talking about, and crypto is can't discriminate. Like, we don't know who you are. Like, you are a pseudonym, and it almost doesn't matter that like you're a pseudonym. And the reason it doesn't matter is because you don't have to be trusted. If I have to trust you, I want to know everything about you. Where are you from? Like, who's your dad? Who's your mom? Like, which legislation are you like, subscribing to? Everything, right? Like, without this, it's very difficult to trust you. But once I don't have to trust you, I'm actually trusting something else. I'm trusting the blockchain that, the code execution conditions are going to be guaranteed. This is a separation of who brings trust and who brings innovation. And this is insane. Like, go back to like 50 years, 60 years, maybe, like the massive like rise of venture capital, right? Is the separation of who brings innovation and who brings capital. And what this does is now there's a huge combinatorics of Somebody can bring innovation, somebody can bring capital. These two fuse together and create something crazy. And the same thing is what is our driving thesis for like crypto is, the decoupling of like trust and innovation. So you have trust underwritten by a different layer, and then you can throw all your innovation into this like common layer. And basically this has, I think, underwritten the entire pseudonymous economy that we as a crypto community are proud of. But as I was looking through all these things, like this thesis, which I is probably widely shared inside the crypto community, I saw one thing that kind of was paradoxical, because my own experience of working on, so as we started working on this at the University of Washington, we had a small group and we were doing research into this thing, and we saw that we could like come up with new consensus protocols or scaling layers or new game theory or any of these things. These are the core infrastructure layers. At the core infrastructure layers, this decoupling of who brings trust and who brings innovation ceased to be true. In fact, it's much harder at an infrastructure layer. Like, what do you do? Like, let's say I had a great idea for a consensus protocol. It just beats like anything out there by 1000x. What can I do? I have to go start a whole new layer one, right? Something like that. And if I have to do that, what it means is not only you have to trust me, you have to trust me to build a community of decentralized trust. That's an absolutely insane proposition that I have to go. I mean, I know how to write a consensus protocol, right? I have no idea how to build a decentralized community of people who you can trust, right? This is just like something else.
Yeah, you can't fork that aspect of it.
It's not, right? And it's so difficult, and it's like an emergent phenomenon. It is not a kind of, hey, you cannot sit on top of a hill and then like bless everybody to come follow you. Makes no sense. But that's precisely what I was seeing all these other people were trying to do, and it's just a completely insane thing. And we can't blame them, because that's the only way you're going to take your new consensus protocol or some new virtual machine or some new idea that you have into life. And I saw this friction is simply insane. This doesn't align with the thesis of the decoupling of trust and innovation. It slows down innovation massively, because imagine I have to trust one company, right? There's somebody sitting there, with a tie and a suit, and like this is his job to like figure out what's the next innovation. He has to go buy it, rent it, license it, do something and get it in the company so that his company grows. But this is like a massive, innovation friction. So the rate of innovation at the dApp layers were exponentially growing, because you can fork, you can copy, you can create new things, and you can kind of like play off of others' innovation and compose with others' protocols. At the infrastructure layer, it was exactly the opposite. You can't do anything. And initially we had consensus protocols. We said, oh, let's go and try to talk to the Bitcoin community. And, we hadn't realized that they had this thesis that actually no governance is the best governance, which means basically no upgrades. And, we like that philosophy in some sense, like no governance is awesome, but how are you going to get innovation? Like, I couldn't figure this out. And as I was digging through, like nobody really had a clear like solution for how we are going to get like the massive rates of innovation that we need at the infrastructure layer, because this bottlenecks everything else. This even bottlenecks the mind to an extent. Like when you think about what crypto projects can you build, you're like, oh, blockchains can do this. They can do like, 1,000 transactions per second or 100 transactions per second or whatever, right? Like there's a conception of what blockchain can do, which is all just a kind of infrastructure layer problem. And it constrains everybody into like a very narrow lane. We're measuring transactions. Only high value transactions can be like settled in this kind of a world. Whereas, the original promise that, of blockchains is this world computer where like, everybody can come and participate in this, like, no digital platform needs intermediation, this kind of a vision. And to actualize this, like we need much, much higher rate of innovation at the core infrastructure layer. So this is what we came to realize. And as I entered into this area as an academic and like practically saw the different governance bottlenecks, and I can understand like Ethereum has been like massively innovative, but it's a huge project, and you can't make sudden jerky movements to this project. It's very difficult, and because a lot of trust is riding on it. It's a massive decentralized community. And I was seeing basically like there are these two massive communities that have built up around like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And Ethereum more or less has aligned its values around this notion of permissionless composable innovation. that's just such a powerful thing. So we felt much more at home with that than just the idea of like, state free money. So we kind of like, as a, I had this like distinct experience. Last year I went to ETH Denver. This is the first time I went to a kind of crypto conference. I've gone to cryptography conferences and blockchain conferences, academic ones, right? And first time I went to ETH Denver, and I come back and um, I, I told a friend who's at Google, and I told him, I went to this conference. I don't hold Ether, not contributed to the Ethereum protocol. There's no relationship between me and Ethereum, but I'm an Ethereum guy, right? I just feel aligned with this ethos, and I feel like this is a kind of community which values principles more than individuals. It values like global good. This was just like so amazing. Like, and I told him, have you ever had anybody go to a Google conference and come back and say I'm a Google guy? That's such a weird and unique experience.
Doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen, and so I just fell in love with the space, and particularly the ethos of the community, which was working towards taking these ideas to everybody. Where I had only interacted before. I've been working on this for 4 years before, but only interacted mostly with the academic and somewhat interacted with the Ethereum research community. But this was just something I really love.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so nice and refreshing to kind of hear that kind of stance on it, because I think very much, and you'll know this now, there's a lot of noise in this space and a lot of kind of people just wanting to come here, like it's the gold rush, it's all this, it's all that. But what you've just stated, like the fundamental reasons are what drive a lot of people to actually want to build in this space from a philosophical, economical, kind of global democratizing kind of landscape, as opposed to just purely being fixed on financial incentives and things like that. So it is nice now and again for people to actually hear the reason why this whole thing's being built, instead of kind of some of the less than shady kind of marketing things that go on in this space. So that's, if you're listening to this, this what Sreeram's just said is the whole reason why this space is kind of around in the first place. So really nice to hear that. So was the following kind of ETH Denver, was that like obviously you've been thinking and building around this idea, was that the kind of final push to be like, yeah, this is, if I needed any further confirmation, this was it?
That's right.
Kind of played out.
We were already like I was already on leave and working on this problem was like bothering me quite a bit, that here is an area which is premised on like permissionless, like rapid innovation, which I think, if I zoom out like one more step, another moment, I have this like interest in, non-zero sum games, right? Games where like, things where multiple participants play and, everybody has a win-win possibility, right? Like these are non-zero sum games. And I think really, why are non-zero sum games even possible, right? Initially, like when I was much younger, I used to think it should not be possible. Like wealth is like, if I get money, you don't get money or whatever, right? And I think there are only like two fundamental reasons why non-zero sum games are possible. One is cooperation, right? Like you and I, like if we go our own way, then we would be able to do something. But like if we work together, we could do something better, right? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that is like a huge non-zero sum aspect. But there's another non-zero sum aspect, which is innovation. Innovation is like, imagine I have like what was sand became silicon, and you create like crazy stuff out of it, right? And sand has no value, but once it's silicon, it has like enormous value. Similarly, oil and gold and nuclear fusion and whatever, right? Like you're able to extract out, innovation transforms something that has no value into something that has potentially huge amount of value. So these are the two non-zero sum games, and I kind of, as an academic, innovation is kind of my kind of wheelhouse. This is the kind of whole premise of academia, is like to turbocharge innovation. And when I looked at it, and here is a space like whose purpose is to maximize the rate of innovation, permissionless, composable innovation. Wow, that's just like so awesome. But here's the problem, right? Like if it's already like really awesome and stuff, like, we don't have something particular to do. Maybe we contribute at the innovation layer, but when I looked at it and I said, oh, actually, that's not true at the infrastructure layer. Can we do something there? So that fascinated me. So I'd already been down the rabbit hole of like already taking a leave and trying to build this for 8 months before I went to ETH Denver. But that, ETH Denver was the confirmation that I found the right community to build this with. Right? You could theoretically, there are many blockchain communities, and many of them have nice properties, but where you feel most at home, and that's what we ended up with, like Ethereum. And because already it's kind of in the ethos that permissionless composable innovation is the reason we are building this stuff. And so the particular idea was, the question was constant for me for like several years preceding, which is how do we maximize the rate of permissionless innovation at the infrastructure layer? Because it's a personal problem I was kind of bottlenecked with. We have these ideas, and we saw other people had maybe even better ideas, and they were not getting in because there was no open competition. And what really affirmed my thesis on this is sharding versus layer twos. Ethereum was originally going to go on the sharding roadmap. And the thing about sharding is which particular sharding protocol to use, how these virtual machines interact with each other, how intra-shard communication happens. All of this would have had to be designed in protocol by the Ethereum team. As smart as they are, it's one view on what can be built. Yeah. Whereas rollups and layer twos, basically, I think of it as permissionless sharding. You build all these rollups, they're all really like shards. But now hundreds of teams are, spending their entire life trying to make these like shards better. And it's just like so much crazier, right? And so much better, so diverse, different ideas come up, like ideas flow back and forth. The rate of innovation completely changed when you just flip like a basic equation. And we have to give it all up to the Ethereum community for actually rallying behind this layer 2 idea, which seemed crazy, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, are you outsourcing like the core function of a blockchain? Like, what are you guys talking about, right? But it just like completely paid off. Like it paid off in a way that I don't think anybody really would have anticipated that's what's going to happen. Is you're going to have like $10 billion protocols built on top of this like common layer. Such an amazing creativity that has come up because of this layer 2 paradigm. So this reaffirmed my like belief that actually permissionless open competition for every single feature, as permissive as the layer 2 ecosystem is, like you can build new virtual machines and new execution layers, you have freedom in choosing a programming language, all of these things, but it's still not the full degrees of freedom. You cannot design a consensus protocol that will get the Ethereum security. You cannot design an oracle that will get the Ethereum security. You cannot design a bridge that gets the Ethereum security. There are many things that the layer 2 paradigm simply cannot solve for. And so that is the kind of context I would say, like before we came up with the idea for Eigen Layer.
Yeah. God, there's lots to unpack. I mean, can we try and do a high level of what is Eigen Layer? I mean, I've been doing as much research as physically possible. I think it's incredible, but there might be some people who they've seen it dotting around. It's definitely doing the rounds in all the kind of social avenues that operate in this space, but I'd love to hear it from the source. Like, what is Eigen Layer?
Before I explain what it is, I'll just explain the name. Eigen Layer, Eigen in German for your own. So it's your own layer. So our conception is anybody should be able to come and build like their new ideas for how to build a distributed system, be it a new bridge, be it an oracle, be it a MEV management system for Ethereum, be it a new consensus protocol, be it a new data availability layer, be it a new like trusted execution environment, be it a secure multi-party computation. Basically anything that you need n distinct nodes to do. And you want to know like where can I go and find like these n nodes to do this thing. And these n nodes have to be distinct and decentralized and globally distributed, whatever the set of properties that you may need, or staked and have economic capital at risk. You may have different conditions, and Eigen Layer is, aspiring. What is it aspiring to be? Like that's part of the name. It's aspiring to be a place where everybody can come and build the layer that they want On top of what, where are we getting these end nodes from? Is it a new network that we came up with? No, it's actually borrowing trust from the Ethereum network and then supplying it to anybody who can then consume it, right? So Ethereum network has this theoretically maybe 500,000 validators, but maybe like 8,000 distinct nodes actually running today. And for every new idea, we don't need to go and find new nodes to go and do these things. Why not reuse this massive trust network that has been bootstrapped out of this grassroots bottom-up movement, organically emerged already? Why can't we use this to power all these new ideas and innovation? Thus, going back to the roots of decoupling trust and innovation. Trust comes because there's a group of nodes that have already staked on the Ethereum protocol. And now we're going to give you a way by which you can reuse the same network, not only of the network of nodes, but also the economic trust. Part of the thing that happens in proof of stake, your listeners, of course, would know well that Ethereum migrated recently from proof of work to proof of stake. And in staking, the core idea is like you put down a bunch of stake and you commit to doing certain actions for the Ethereum protocol. And if you don't do these actions correctly, then you may lose your stake, right? And stake being a fully digital asset controlled by the blockchain, you have an internal power inside the blockchain to remove it as a negative incentive for your misbehavior. And what we realized is that once you have proof of stake and you have a fully programmable blockchain, these are the two basic units needed to build Eigen Layer. You have proof of stake and you have like a fully programmable blockchain. What happens is you have the stake and you can opt in, if you can opt in your own particular stake to like a variety of slashing conditions, to a variety of negative and positive incentives, rather than the one negative and positive incentive. Hey, I'm committing to make blocks in Ethereum, give me the Ethereum rewards. If I don't do it correctly, I'm willing to lose my stake, right? That's what you're doing when you're entering into the agreement to the Ethereum 2 proof of stake smart contracts. Instead, on Eigen Layer, what you do is, in addition to Ethereum staking, you also participate in Ethereum staking and get those rewards. In addition to it, you're adding on like a sequence of other risks. You could say, yeah, I'm opting into this MEV protocol and that data oracle and the storage protocol and this bridge, whatever set of things that other people have built. You're just like turning on node software for those things. And you're opting in to these additional slashing conditions. Eigen Layer itself is just a series of Ethereum smart contracts, EVM smart contracts written for Ethereum. And it controls your staking in, you stake in the Ethereum protocol and then set the withdrawal powers to these Eigen Layer contracts. So normally you have this address called a withdrawal address. You set the withdrawal address to the Eigen Layer contracts. And then the Eigen Layer contracts can then, in the normal path, in the happy path, you've served your thing, you want to withdraw, you tell the Eigen Layer contracts, it's going to trigger the withdrawal for you. Right? But in the bad path, that you actually did something bad according to one of the provable middleware or service smart contracts that you have opted into. On Eigen Layer, many people can build these services and you opted into several of them. They say, oh, that contract has sent me a provable message that, in that particular protocol, you have double signed, or you've claimed that you have stored the data, but when the recovery mechanism asked for the data to be produced on chain or some random sampling or whatever, you didn't produce it, I'm gonna slash you. I'm gonna remove your stake. So what it does is, we call it restaking, which is basically you're staking in Ethereum and then you're staking on Eigen Layer. And people think a lot about like, is it over leveraging Ethereum and all these things? But I think the one way of thinking about it is it's programmable staking. Like when you're staking, like all you're doing is you're agreeing to some course of action, right? You're saying, I'm following the Ethereum protocol. If I don't follow it, I'm willing to lose my money. When you're opting into Eigen Layer, what you're saying is, I'm opting into Ethereum and these three other conditions. I'll produce the block correctly for this other thing. I produce this thing correctly for produce the data on request, whatever set of conditions, I'm opting into them. So as long as you hold by the conditions of that contract, your money cannot be taken away from you, right? Mm-hmm. It's very different from taking a leverage position in a DeFi protocol where you're fundamentally taking a price risk. So all of DeFi yield is, in some sense, you're underwriting some price risk and you're getting a compensation for that. And whereas I think Eigen Layer, broadens the category of core protocol staking yield. We call it validation yield. Validation yield is premised on an information asymmetry. The provider of the validation services knows that they will not get slashed. If they're honest, they're never going to get slashed, except for smart contract risk, which we all have to take at different points. But the core, if the contracts are well audited and stuff, then you're fundamentally not subjecting yourself to smart contract risk. You're fundamentally only subjecting yourself to validation. So the yield you're getting is a validation yield, and the risk that you're taking is that you don't do validation correctly. And if you know you're running the right version of the software and tethered to the right smart contracts, you can actually rapidly reduce the risk that you're taking while participating in that yield. Another way of thinking about this whole EigenLayer platform is, if you ask, what is the core ingredient of blockchains, right? What is the core ingredient of any crypto blockchain application? It's decentralized trust. It is the essential ingredient. You take any application and then just suck out all the decentralized trust from it, it ceases to be a crypto or a blockchain solution, right? You can say anything else about it, but we wouldn't call it as belonging to this community. So if decentralized trust is the essential ingredient, we need markets for decentralized trust to be traded, transported, and sold across different dimensions. That's the EigenLayer market. EigenLayer is a marketplace in which you can buy and sell decentralized trust. And all that we're doing is by abstracting out what set of conditions you're opting in for slashing, or what set of things you can run, and making it a free market. Just making it a free market of stakers. Each staker can decide what set of risks they're opting into or not. You can essentially create a free market of decentralized trust. This has a lot of second order consequences, but I can talk about it as we go on.
Yeah. So what would the user flow look like there? So let's say I'm staked on Ethereum, and then I want to come to EigenLayer, and let's say there's an Oracle, a bridge, and a data availability layer that I want to kind of then restake on. And maybe there's a fourth that I don't really want to opt into, and I can kind of choose that based on my own kind of decisions and risks. So staked on Ethereum, what's the user process look like following that?
Okay, so we have two modes of restaking. The first mode is called liquid restaking. You take a liquid staking token. I'm explaining this first because it's the easiest to understand. Take one of the liquid staking tokens that is supported on that particular middleware. It could be the Oracle, and the Oracle could say, yeah, I'm okay with Lido staked ETH and this particular centralized staking derivative, but not okay with other staking derivative. Each service can kind of say what they want and what they don't want. And this could be a very specific to the service. EigenLayer itself supports all, you can kind of restake anything that you want. Okay, so on EigenLayer, you take the liquid staking derivative, you lock it into the EigenLayer contracts, and once you deposit it into the EigenLayer contracts, you specify which services you're opting into. So there's the EigenLayer contracts, and each middleware has a middleware contract. The middleware contract specifies what is the registration condition, what tokens can you have, how much should you have of it, whatever. There's some registration conditions for the middleware. Second one, it has payment conditions. It says if you store 1 gigabyte of data, I'm going to give you 1 ETH, whatever, payment conditions. It specifies slashing conditions, the negative incentives around if you do something bad, what's going to happen. And that's just a programmatic thing written on the Ethereum platform. So you look at all these things and then you say, okay, now my risk because of this is X, right? And maybe this contract is well vetted already. X TVL is there, already ABCD audit agencies have certified it, and you have to take a call based on all this information. We as the kind of EigenLayer team, or later a DAO or whatever, could help in those decisions, but eventually it's up to the individual to actually make these decisions. So you make these decisions and then you say, okay, I'm okay to opt into this one, because the operational cost that I have to take to store 1 GB is only 0.1 ETH, but I'm getting 1 ETH out of it, and the risk premium that I'm taking is whatever, half ETH, so I'm getting more than what I'm putting in. So that's the kind of calculation that is going on in the kind of staker's mind. The staker who holds the liquid staking derivative in this case could say, hey, I'm just going to be my own validator. I can run my own operator. we call this role operator in our system. So I'm going to be my own operator. I run the system myself. I have a well set up node infrastructure. I'm just going to download these like 5 software and run it, right? Node software for these 5 systems that I've opted into. Or you may say, yeah, this is too much work. I don't want to bother with it. Already the Lido team's like doing a great job doing like validation for my ETH. And anyway, I'm trusting them. If they or a subset of the Lido node operators actually provide a service where they can allow me to restake my Lido stake ETH for like, Eigen Layer services, I could delegate to them and they will take care of it, right? Like some set of them
That's
will.
interesting.
So those will be the 2 options. You could own your risk and operations, or you could say like, you can outsource it. So we treat ourselves like we are not a liquid staking service or anything. So we don't, one of the hard things about being a liquid staking operator is you have to own the relationship with operators, make sure they're doing the right thing, have insurance mechanisms, all kinds of other things to ensure that the risk is low. That's not what EigenLayer's specialty is. So we want to let the liquid staking operators take on some of these additional things. They get additional yield because of this. Okay. But so this is the kind of workflow is either you opt in, you take your liquid staking ETH, you opt in, and then you opt into Eigen Layer, and then you opt into some subset of these new services, and then you download those services and run it yourself, or you delegate to like some operator who can then run all these services for you. So that's like the kind of liquid staking derivative workflow. The native restaking workflow, which we also pay a lot of attention to, because one of the core values of Ethereum is to enable anybody with just like, at their home to participate in this like massive decentralized economy. So we want to make sure to be compliant and actually, if possible, even enhance this like decentralized staking infrastructure. So the idea is like, if you're a home staker, you could say, hey, here is a service. It's lightweight and I want to download and run it and participate in the system. Or you may say, oh no, these services are too heavyweight. I'm a volunteer and I'm running this to provide censorship resistance and other guarantees and decentralization for the Ethereum network. But for some of these EigenLayer services, I don't care. I'm going to delegate to some operator. And you could do one or the other. And what this does is this lets you basically take, continue to be a kind of home operator for Ethereum, but like be a delegated operator for EigenLayer. Or you could completely own your risk and say that, hey, I'm just going to be a home operator for everything, only like opt into services that I can run myself. And one of our ethos inside the EigenLayer team is we want to try to build a lot of interesting services which are lightweight, but require this high decentralized trust, right? Like for example, an Oracle price feed is a great example of what could really use like tens of thousands of nodes around the world like contributing to it. But it is not heavyweight, right? Like to do a price feed query is like very, very lightweight. We are designing the first middleware on top of EigenLayer. We call EigenDA, which is a data availability protocol. It just like allows you to publish data and know that it's published and available for anybody to download within a period of time. And in this protocol, we made sure to design that every node only needs to have like 20% more like requirements than to validate on Ethereum. So as long as you have a 20% slack, and most nodes do today, like you can actually opt into this particular service. So this is the kind of services that we want to launch. So when you're talking about home stakers, they don't have a liquid staking derivative. So what do they restake? The way they restake is you go and stake in the Ethereum contracts. And when you stake in the Ethereum contracts, you have the freedom to set the withdrawal credentials. You set the withdrawal credentials to the EigenLayer smart contract. Since normally you just set it to your like hardware wallet or like something, instead you set it to the EigenLayer contracts. That's it. So, and then after that, it's the same thing. Then you can opt into any of the services. Then you can opt into like who's the delegated operator? Is it yourself? Is it somebody else? All of these together determine your like staking position. So that's how the workflow of how the EigenLayer platform looks. These interfaces can be pretty complicated initially, and we have to do a lot of work to figure out like how we are going to enable nodes to run like tens or hundreds or thousands of softwares eventually. So it's a lot of work to figure these things out. So initially we're taking it slow, starting with one service, few partnered services, and then we'll start opening it up to like this wide array of services that anybody can build.
Nice. So with EigenDA, So I'm just thinking of kind of products that are already kind of on the market. Are you guys opening the door to those people as well, or would you like,
Yeah.
kind of like rather see native apps, or don't necessarily care either way? You just kind of want people to be building with that kind of restaked infrastructure that you guys are building. Because the immediate thing that I think of is all these projects that are out there, and they've kind of might be an Oracle, not to name any names, or kind of bridges and things like that, but they've kind of built up this reputation and network, and there's a token behind it and things like that. How do you guys kind of look at that? Because for me, it's why is the token there if Eigen Layer's around?
Okay, so you guys do a lot of DeFi here, so you could kind of like transfer that question for like pretty much a lot of DeFi protocols and ask like, why does a DeFi protocol need a token, right? And we have all the answers. A fee switch. You have the answer that you need governance. You need to decentralize it. There is some advantage in holding rights to govern these protocols. The same set of answers will hold to be true for like these protocols on top of EigenLayer. In fact, I think there are like various types of business models one could build on top of EigenLayer, and I'll just run through some of them so that you can kind of like anchor around this. So one, which I would call the least crypto native model, is just build a service, throw it on top of EigenLayer, and whenever anybody uses the service, you take a cut as a creator of the service. Maybe you take a 30%, maybe you take a 50%. You design the economics, right? We don't know what is good for your service. So you design it, and then you say, like, this is my cut, and then the remaining is the staker's cut, right? And you design this economics and then throw this contract out and throw the node software out. Everybody looks at it and says, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And then they opt in. And your cut, your 30% or 50% goes to your private wallet. Okay. So you could run like a pure, like normal company with company controlling the wallet. And the company is not in the way of decentralization. It is not in the way of service provision. It is just a purely economic entity, which is creating this massive like service. It could be an Oracle, it could be like anything else that is accruing value into its wallet. So you built basically a business model for your company. But what we've done is, just going back to my analogy of the separation of trust and innovation, the company is just the innovation engine and it's being paid the innovation premium, right? Over some time, like if they're just like doing this and it's a kind of simple thing that anybody else can replicate, of course, they won't be able to charge this 50% continuously. In a free market, somebody else will build the same service on EigenLayer and arbitrage them out. But if they're actually innovative and keeping up and doing upgrades and bringing new customers and all this stuff, then they can grow to be like maybe the next Google, who knows, right? So you can start building a complete like, it's crypto native only to the extent that it relies on a decentralized network, but the decentralized network is not the company. The innovation is done in the company, which is just an agile institution, which is focused, it collects a group of individuals who are incentivized to like maximize the value of this innovation. So that's one example of a business model on EigenLayer, which is a kind of non-tokenized business model, which may be what you were having in mind. But then you can go like deeper into the crypto stack, and we all love that kind of stuff too. So you can go and you can start saying, actually, there is a bootstrapping problem on EigenLayer. Then I want to start my new Oracle, let's say, and then I say that, hey, all these 10,000 nodes come and validate and give price feeds for my Oracle. And they're all like, yeah, on day one, you got nothing, man. Like you got no market, no interest. Like what am I like, serving for? Like I got nothing here. So you could basically say that instead of all this fee going into like my, personal wallet, these fees are actually accruing to some token in either a native fee or a fee switch or whatever, right? And what that does is then you can tell the validators that, hey, actually what you're getting is not the fee that you're being paid today, but along with the fee, you may get like a fraction of ownership in this network. And that makes a lot of sense because they're taking risk to come and validate on your network when you got nothing going on. So you have to pay like, that's the really cool thing that crypto also invented, is this mechanism to share, value and align different entities. And you could do the same thing here, which is what you were doing anyway. If you created your own token staking, you were kind of incentivizing people with the potential upside of that. But for a given unit of dollar, how much restaking security you can buy is way more than how much your own staking security you can buy, because of course it's capped by your own token value and so on. Okay, so that's a second business model one could use on Eigen Layer. A third business model, which is even more sophisticated, is you could say, yeah, this is great. Like, you have these ETH guys like coming and validating my protocol. It's all good. And when they behave in a provably slashable violation, I can write a contract that slashes them. But, my own token stakers are also like very, very strongly aligned to my, it's a community that will upgrade the software whenever I tell them, right? Like they don't have to wait for a slow cycle or whatever. They are much closer tuned to my ecosystem, and they suffer the effects of like wrongdoing, not only in provable objective slashing, but also in price exposure, right? Like if the protocol doesn't do well, their price tanks, and it's in their interest to do well. So what you could do is you could build an incentive for dual staking. You could say, oh, I'm borrowing EigenLayer trust from ETH staking, but I'm also getting some trust from my own new token quorum staking. And those token quorum holders, they're staking their tokens and they are providing the service. And for example, if it's an Oracle feed, you'll say that, oh, I need like a majority of my token holders to return a certain value, and the ETH stakers to return a certain value. And only if these two agree or within some limit or whatever, only then I consider the input as valid. So you can start building like very innovative like economics. The space for what this is like much larger than the space for token and economic design in without restaking. So just think of it as like an additional dimension. You could even start doing things like, initially I need the ETH quorum for bootstrapping, so I'm willing to pay like 80% of my fees to the ETH quorum. But eventually, like my own token quorum will be more valuable, so I'll only pay like 20% of the value to the ETH staking. I'll still keep them as a risk hedge, because if my token starts going down in value, people exit the system because it's not safe. But because there's a certain amount of ETH restake, that basically creates a floor for security to my system. So you can start creating very sophisticated like effects and token, economic systems, which keep, potentially like all the, which basically like allow you various points on the trade-off between risk hedge, having provable security, getting the power of bootstrapping, and like preserving internal value into your own ecosystem. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds in this kind of a way. And when I think about like token economic systems, like, there are clearly systems that have like death spirals, right? And one of the things is the security death spiral, where like as your token goes down in value, it's not secure enough to run whatever validation system you were thinking about, and then people disconnect from that system. As people disconnect from that system, people speculate your token down even more, and it goes down and down in value. And like having a kind of a minimal security base borrowed from Ethereum kind of breaks that negative death spiral.
Yeah,
right?
backstops it in case of anything like that. Yeah,
exactly. And so what you're doing is paying an insurance fee for somebody like backstopping your like protection, and it's worth something to do that.
Yeah. Jeez. I really love it. So again, is there, obviously probably won't be able to go into it too deeply here, but is there any kind of infrastructure protocols on the market now that you guys are, in talks with, that are gonna have a dual staking model with you guys, with the restaked ETH and their own token? Is those conversations happening behind closed doors? Obviously, you don't need to go into it into depth here. Obviously, if it's not public.
So the one thing that has been announced is Mantle, which is the community behind BitDAO, is building a new rollup. This rollup they're considering to build on EigenDA, our data availability service, and it's built on the premise of dual staking, where the BitDAO community has a token called the Bit token, and they can stake that token for data availability, while there's another quorum of ETH stakers which is also supporting the same thing, and a data is considered available only if it is certified by both the different like groups that the data is available. So that's an example of, in fact, I think this is a very important thing to like talk about, and I haven't talked much about this economic system, so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it here. The idea that like you can have a fully incentivized system where it doesn't mean like hey, we are anti-token, or like, it it's very use case dependent. Like each protocol has to understand its own like economic structures. Where is the decentralization required? When is it not required? Where is the value accruing? Is it compliant? All of these things are very, very nuanced and dependent on protocols. And so we're not here to say that one should take one path or the other path. We just want to offer the maximum possible variety of paths. If a traditional company like a Meta or a Reddit or a kind of like a Microsoft wants to use like the decentralized cloud that is now Ethereum, and like use it for some purpose, but they don't feel like they have to like create a token or something, they can use something like Eigen Layer for that. But somebody else wants to do like their own token, they can use it for payment. They can use it as a payment token, they can use it as a staking token, they can use it as a reward token. Like you can design your economics around Eigen Layer.
Wow. So I was listening to when you jumped on, I think it was Empire with Santi and Jason, and there seemed to be a bit of a confusion from their part with regards to I suppose the best way to kind of phrase it from my understanding would be, does kind of Eigen increase the attack surface, or is it neutral based on this? Because I think that was something that I think you were delivering quite well, but I don't think it got received properly. So I don't know if you can get into that a little bit.
Sure. Okay, just broadly, there are two kinds of risks. And I think, one important thing to say is, what are we doing here? Like, what is EigenLayer actually accomplishing? Is I would call this security aggregation. So people think of this as security sharing, but actually it is security aggregation. Let me just like clarify the difference between these two things. So security sharing is like, I have a $10 billion pool in Ethereum, and then now I'm restaking across like 20 services. Now this $10 billion shared across these 20 services. No, this is not true. What's actually happening is, imagine there were like 20 protocols. Each of them were sustaining like a $1 billion staking, right? And now they all aggregate back on Ethereum. Ethereum had $10 billion staking. Then theoretically, at the same fee that you were charging on the other system, you could sustain a 10 billion plus 1 into $20 billion of staking, because each of those 20 protocols were able to sustain a $1 billion staking. They were paying out enough in fee to sustain it. So you could actually sustain like a $30 billion economic quorum, which is now aggregated, shared across Ethereum and all these services. So security of Ethereum is not remaining static. As you add more services, the fee accrual increases the amount staked and increases the core security. So what we're building is a mechanism for aggregated security or shared security. So as you get more and more things to participate in this economy, the security stretches based on all these things. Not only the security stretches, the value of ETH itself stretches, right? Like ETH is in some way like the future potential fee earning, whatever, plus the monetary premium. Discounting the monetary premium, just look at this term, which is basically just the fee earning potential. If the fee earning potential really 20x, then ETH could go 20x. So that's what is actually happening. In fact, this dynamic of aggregated security is already inherent in Ethereum, right? Like every new dApp that is built on Ethereum does not increase the amount of security that Ethereum has, at least not immediately. The immediate effect is it increases the honeypot. It increases the attack surface of Ethereum, right? But it does not increase like the cost of corruption, the cost to attack the system. But eventually it increases the cost of corruption by supplying more fee and increasing the value of ETH and so on. Okay, that's the first order analysis. Let's do another so this is before I got into the security risks. I just want to clarify that EigenLayer is aggregated security, not simply just like, I already have a security pool and I'm just sharing it. You're just aggregating all of this into one common platform. The aggregated security is bigger than the original security that Ethereum had. Okay, now let's go into this equation. There are two parts to the that are specific to EigenLayer. The first part is, there is a kind of, when you concatenate, when you do this aggregated security, what happens is like some misbehavior of one service can cause a leakage to other services, right? And the most important thing we worry about a lot is what about uh, you think that your protocol only slashes when you don't serve the data, but what if there was a smart contract bug that this slashed every ETH staker, right? Or if it was an implanted malicious bug. So how are we going to protect against this, right? And the way I think about it is you can kind of take an analogy. What if there was a kind of like the Ethereum slashing contract, the native base Ethereum slashing contract had an error? What are we going to do? It's basically societal consensus and forking. But we don't want to like fork the Ethereum protocol for every small thing that happens on Eigen Layer. It's not reasonable. It's not correct. One should not do it like that. So, but the core point is that there is a social consensus layer, a subjective human consensus, which is what is driving the forking process. Can we kind of enshrine it into the Eigen Layer? And that's what we do. We have a veto, like a protocol veto, which basically is like a committee which can veto slashing decisions. The only thing they can do is to veto slashing decisions. They cannot add on new slashing. So slashing happens only if the contract triggers it and this committee approves it. So it's a kind of double gating. And so this committee is kind of like our way to buffer the kind of like leakage of security attacks, going from one service to another, to then drain all the ETH staker, and then that just leaks to everything else. So that's our first point. So this slashing veto is needs to be trusted by both the middlewares. Otherwise, they are not going to opt into this. They may say, "Oh, this." So of course, it's most trusted by the stakers, because otherwise, stakers are not going to opt into this system. And middlewares have to look at this trusted quorum and see if it makes sense to them or not. Because what if this committee vetoes genuine slashing decisions, and that's not good. Okay, so there is a two-sided trust on this thing for different purposes, and like the error mode of what if this goes wrong is actually like different on different sides. Okay, so that's a kind of like, just like I want to say, like when people think of, there's a quorum or governance or something, some people freak out, but it's there in every layer too. It's there in every DeFi protocol. If you just like put a microscope, you will know, like it's there everywhere. And I'm not minimizing it. It's a problem that as a community we haven't really figured out how to do formal audits. We haven't figured out how to make sure that smart contracts are truly trustless. We have to get there, but we're using these as like intermediate stages to get there. Even inside EigenLayer, we actually think of there'll be two different modes. One is a middleware which is subject to this like slashing veto, and like eventually there'll be middleware on EigenLayer which say, I don't want to be subject to any slashing veto, because that's taking off the trust on me. But then it's upon the middleware to convince the stakers that they have to opt into like a naked slashing, right? Like it's not protected, like there is no layer of buffering, like unbuffered slashing. And that is what we expect to happen as like services launch on EigenLayer and they mature and ossify. They'll go on to a layer where they say like, oh, I don't need you guys like under your slashing veto. I'll just operate natively. I've earned the trust from the stakers to do like native, or non-intermediated slashing. So that's the evolution path for EigenLayer. That will be service dependent. And since EigenLayer is this, like the way we think about it is we want to be the horizon of open innovation, like where new things are come and people try it and play with it. And eventually either they ossify into a service on EigenLayer, or even better, sometimes they ossify as features into Ethereum. Like, that would be like an awesome outcome, that basically this is a place where you have, and that's already like, something that's underneath the layer 2 phenomenon. Like people think about like, once you have like a ZK EVM on a layer 2, then maybe like that'll be a default thing for Ethereum. So it's something like that we aspire to be on EigenLayer. And, it's encouraging to see from the Ethereum Foundation there is interest in, at least some aspects of this. For example, how to do MEV management on EigenLayer and so on. They're considering how to bring it in protocol to Ethereum itself. At least in the research forums, people are discussing it. But this is one mode of risk on EigenLayer. Another mode of risk is, are you increasing leverage? Like, is it over leveraging stake? And we don't really think so. There are some aspects to it, and we are careful, and we want to be very careful, and we want to take community input here. But I think the the fact is already Ethereum's like 20x over leveraged. Like it has $20 billion staked and there's a $400 billion whatever, right? Like some large amount of value riding on it. And one has to look very carefully at why this works. And we have some internal thoughts, and we'll start engaging with the community in trying to distill and understand how to understand these leverage conditions carefully. And this is something we don't want to take it lightly, but also it's just want to throw it out that there is a lot more understanding that is needed before we can kind of crystallize where leverage accrues and what is okay and what is not okay. So we are very much in active research on it, and definitely engage the community with it.
Makes sense. So what kind of stage are you guys at now? What should people be kind of on the lookout for on the short to medium term? Did you guys go through capital raise or anything? Where are you guys at with that?
Yeah, so we are, as far as the product, we are looking at a launch in sometime this year, maybe hopefully, optimistically, middle of the year sometime, maybe summer. But in terms of team, we are actively looking for people who are excited by this vision of like permissionless innovation and infrastructure layer innovation. Particularly, it's a kind of new market in the sense that all the layer 2s and layer 1s are all contending for the same set of developers, right? Like smart contract builders, like saying, hey, we give you this, we give you that, like come and build on this language, that language, which is awesome. But it's the same pool of developers, right? Like unless you segmented them by language. But I think what Eigen Layer does is open up an opportunity for attracting infrastructure layer builders, right? People who want to build new consensus protocols, who want to build new oracles, new scalability protocols, who felt bottlenecked by the lack of open innovation on these things. Because it's hard to put yourself in these positions, but like if you're a smart contract developer, you can go and work at one of 1,000 companies or go and start your own smart contract project. It's very low friction. If you are a distributed systems builder and you're very passionate about building the crypto infrastructure, there are maybe like one of 10 like layer ones you could go join in, or like a couple of like oracles and bridges that you would go join in. So and the bar to start your own L1 is pretty insane, as it should be, like because you have to start your own community. And what we're doing is unlocking this community of builders who are infrastructure layer builders who want to build new, crazy, wacky distributed systems to come and just like use Eigen Layer and then try to see if it's working. And when I said that there are these graduated series of business models, you could start with the most lightweight one, just like dApps do, right? Like you don't have to say like on day one, I'm doing this token and this and that. Say, yeah, just have a wallet, throw it out, see if people can use it, do the business development, get users, find product market fit, and then figure out how to decentralize. So there are lots of paths for builders like that. So as we open up the platform, we'll be looking for stakers, like people who are doing native staking, people who are doing liquid staking. We'll be looking for operators, people who run node operations. We are looking for internally in our team, always looking for people building distributed systems, smart contracts, any of this stuff at the core protocol layers. Really happy to engage with any of this set of people.
Awesome. Well, we've just hit the top of the hour. Is there any kind of places that you'd like to steer people if they want to kind of find out some more? Is there Discord, Twitter?
Yeah, so we are right now. The best place is Twitter. The handle is at EigenLayer, EIGENLAYER. But we are starting a discourse. It's going to be like a research forum where we can all brainstorm like new ideas for what kinds of things that this unlocks, and we will engage closely with the community on questions like, how do we understand leverage? How do we do insurance on Eigen Layer? How do we build new like MEV solutions on Eigen Layer and things like this? And we hope to have a close engagement in the coming weeks. Hopefully, we'll go live with our discourse.
Awesome. Well, Sreeram, thank you very much for your time. As I said, I don't want to keep you for too long because I'm sure you've got a million other people pestering you for your time at this point in time. So, yeah, thanks again for coming on. And as I say, you're more than welcome back on whenever, close leading up to launch and leading up to mainnet and things like that. Love to kind of run it back with you. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate it. And thanks to the Buckmates community for listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Right, take it easy, everyone. Speak soon.